Good evening, all of you. Sorry to interrupt your conversations. We would like to start with the evening program. I'm Carol. I'm one of the co-founders of the Female Founder Summit. I'm really happy that you're all here tonight, that you take the time to join us. And I will not talk so much this evening. I will have a short presentation later, but we have a special moderator for tonight. This is Ariel Gökmen, and he's actually going to guide us through the evening. Please welcome Ariel.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Carol. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Very welcome to this evening session. I heard you had the full day already full of presentations, so we try to engage a little bit more tonight, also that we have some interaction. So please, if you have a question, also to the speakers afterwards, try to make yourselves known so we can do this together. Oh, thank you. Now, if I may, I think I should not say so much about myself. You can read, if you like, in the documentation. What I would like to do, though, is to introduce already our first keynote speaker, and this is Trudy Hammerly, and I'm very happy to welcome her with a small applause, if you may. And in the meantime, I can maybe tell you a little bit about Trudy. At least that's what she told me what I should say. Trudy Hammerly is actually a chemist by education, and she has a lot of experience in research and development, especially in the pharma industry, which doesn't come as a surprise. She was CEO of startups herself, and she also acts as a business angel, so she can indeed see both worlds as such. Today, she is on the board of the Swiss Commission for Technology and Innovation, which focuses on startups and entrepreneurship. So she's very pertinent to what you were studying the whole day. And from January 2018, the very commission which I just spoke of will be transformed into InnoSwiss, where Trudy continues to be a member of the board and chairs the Audit and Compliance Committee. So I give you Trudy Hammerly. Thank you, Trudy.
Very much, Ariel. Thank you. Now, I know that some of you have already, today, this afternoon, heard from Nancy Govinder, who is a head coach working for CTI, about the kind of work that CTI has done to support startups and small and medium-sized enterprises over the last years. And there's a big change coming for us in the organization where we transition now from CTI to InnoSwiss, and I'm here to talk to you briefly about that as an introduction. This is Anna and Tobias. Anna and Tobias have developed VibWife, which is a system that helps to physically move a woman in labor, which is very important, and I should know, I've had two, as it makes it easier for the baby to assume the necessary position in order to be born without complications. But midwives who have learned techniques to move the women in labor don't always have the time in real life to be able to do it properly. And so this system, the VibWife system, is an answer to a specific customer need. Now, they've developed the prototype, which actually is hidden inside the mattress. And they've done this using a CTI-supported R&D project. They're also currently going through CTI startup coaching. And it's a perfect example of what CTI has been doing successfully until now, and what InnoSwiss would like to do, and it's to encourage and to support innovation going forward. But what is innovation? And I searched around for different possible definitions of it, and the one that I like the most is almost an amalgamation of others. And it's basically to state that innovation is ultimately defined as executing an idea that addresses a specific challenge and achieves value for both the company and the customers. And I personally like to emphasize the word executing, because otherwise an innovative idea remains just that, an idea. And we at CTI and InnoSwiss in the future see our role as key to supporting companies in executing their innovative ideas. Now, what I will do is just briefly introduce myself with a little bit more information. So yes, I'm originally a chemist. And as you can probably tell from my amazing Swiss accent, I actually grew up in the UK. But I am Swiss, my dad's Swiss. He left in the 50s, so I came back. I felt that was a pretty fair deal. Since I came back after finishing my chemistry studies, I've worked at the Paul Scher Institute and for over 20 years in Ciba-Geigy and then Novartis Pharmaceuticals in Basel, mostly in R&D leadership roles, and lastly in compliance, while at the same time studying 2 years part-time for an MBA. Now, in St. Gallen, I should add, where at least one person in the audience was on my course and knows exactly what we were doing for 2 years. I left the corporate world nearly 4 years ago to join colleagues in a life science startup to develop a new treatment for periodontitis. And I'm not going to go into the details of that, especially since you guys have just eaten. So I joined CTI, the domain Startup and Entrepreneurship, in January 2016. It's a very diverse team, and I really mean that. We support various instruments that CTI developed for the startups and the training and the ecosystem support. And I'm proud to know many of the great coaches and head coaches that we have across the country that tirelessly work to increase the number and the quality of science-based innovation in Switzerland. Now, with this transition, I joined the new InnoSwiss board of directors late last year, and we've spent this year working on the transition, and fingers crossed it works. It's a bit like the year 2000, where we weren't sure if all the computer systems would collapse. That's kind of how it feels at the moment, so bear with us. But I'm going to present to you the key points of what InnoSwiss is about, and hold on to the end because of a very important message for everybody in the room. So I hope you're paying attention and don't fall asleep too quickly. A key message for startups that have had support or are looking for support similar to what CTI has provided is that the core responsibilities of CTI as they move into InnoSwiss will remain largely intact. I've said that encouraging innovation is what we have been and will continue to do, but of course there will be some changes. The Swiss Parliament launched a motion to reform CTI into a federal institution, much like the Swiss National Science Foundation, with the aim to better serve the objectives that they were looking for. So to even more effectively fulfill its mission of promoting innovation in the interests of contributing to employment and growth in Switzerland, which we'll underline here, to enjoy greater instrumental and financial flexibility in its operational activities, and to achieve a clearer organizational structure where we separate the strategic responsibilities and the operational implementation of them. And we also want to become more fully integrated in the Swiss research and innovation promotion landscape. Now, InnoSwiss consists of 4 bodies that I'll briefly explain. We have the governing board, of which I'm a member, with a strategic body of the future InnoSwiss. And our remit is to strategically, I can never get that word right, strategically guide InnoSwiss in accordance with the objectives of the Federal Council and submit an annual report and monitor progress against our objectives. We appoint members of the Executive Committee, and in the transitional year this year, we've taken steps to make sure that we can start as well as possible on January the 1st. The Executive Committee includes the CEO, together with her executive team, and there I emphasize the word her executive team, because it's a lady, will operationally implement and manage the processes and budget requirements to ensure that all the instruments are run efficiently and effectively. And then I come to the Innovation Council, which we nominated in July. The Council relies on people who are professionally active and can use their experience in their work at InnoSwiss. The board attaches particular importance to quality and diversity. The new members bring diversity to the Innovation Council, both with their professional expertise in business and/or in academia, and also their cultural background. 11 members are based in German-speaking Switzerland, 7 in the French-speaking Switzerland, 2 in the Ticino, and 1 member is even working abroad. 38% are women. There are 21 members currently, with the option to expand to 25. And that depends a lot on new growth areas. So if we identify a new and disruptive technology, then we have the opportunity to hire an additional member of the Innovation Council in order to manage that kind of work in that field that's growing. The Council decides on the funding applications and provides scientific and innovative related support to those funded projects. And it develops the proposals and implements. Now, what we offer at CTI and in the future in Innoswiss are some key instruments. They're not exhaustive. This is just the main 4 that will remain available to people who are building new companies or to existing companies that want to create new and innovative science-based projects. The first is to start your business. Startup coaching is provided, and Nancy, I'm sure, talked about that earlier today, so I won't go into details. But it's important to note that Innoswiss will no longer allocate the coaches to the startups. That means the startups can choose them themselves. However, Innoswiss will make sure that all of the coaches available to startups have been accredited and therefore deliver the kind of quality and experience in entrepreneurship that's needed to support your companies. The second is to start your innovation project, and here are, I think, the bulk of the financing that's provided by Innoswiss in the future. They're R&D projects between companies and academic institutions in Switzerland, where, yeah, it's about 80%, I think, of the total volume per year, and we have a budget of around 200, maybe a little bit more than 200 million Swiss francs a year that we provide. Then we have Go International. Startups are able to attend market entry camps in other countries, in Boston, in Shanghai, in India. And this allows them to enter foreign markets a little bit more easily and they gain more experience. We also have European network advisors that used to be part of EU research. They're now part of Innoswiss. And these guys are really, really experts when it comes to accessing Horizon 2020 funding or Eurostars. And finally, Be Connected. Under Innoswiss, the innovation mentors and the national thematic networks will continue in their vital work in order to connect SMEs or KMUs with our research institutions to encourage greater innovation in these SMEs. I think it's important that we emphasize we don't just want to support startups, we want to support existing companies that are looking for new and innovative projects in order to even stay alive, because without innovation, it's very difficult to stay and exist. We're also looking to re-engage in support for the ecosystem. We've supported accelerator programs around Switzerland. We've supported business angel networks in the past and the training of business angels in order to increase the amount of financing that's available in Switzerland for these startups. And this is something that we believe in because the more fertile that the ground is, the better the plants are able to grow. On a practical note, for those of you now eager to make a CTI application, I have to warn you that the system shut down on the 3rd of November until the beginning of February so that we can transition all of our systems from CTI to Innoswiss. So if you want to make a project application, please do. You can do it online, but you cannot make the actual application. You can just create it in the online tool, but you can't actually submit it until the beginning of February now. And since we advertised this fact, interestingly, for the first time in a very long time, we had 250 applications at the end of October. So some people have been very busy in the last few weeks. And I guess we'll be busy over Christmas. So together with my colleagues at the Innoswiss board, we're focusing on the strategic goals that have been outlined by the Federal Council. We still are, obviously we have taxpayers' money and we're working for the government, but we're an individual separate institute from January 1st. But we align all of our goals with the Federal Council, and that's very important. We are focusing on identifying new business models. So what's different is we want new business models. We want to help young companies also with the potential for high growth. We're very good at helping startups to get started. We're not very good at identifying those startups that have a real potential for significant growth and helping them to achieve that in a very short space of time. And that's something we really see as important for the benefit of the Swiss economy. We're looking to create greater and more efficient collaboration with regional, cantonal players and expand our reach internationally to support growth of Swiss companies abroad. Now, some of the biggest companies in the world today are less than 10 to 15 years old and are based on technologies that did not exist beforehand. So we need to be identifying these future technologies early. I kind of liken it a bit to surfing, and I don't mean the web. A surfer needs to identify a good wave approaching and jump just at the right time in order to catch it. And that experience can be exhilarating. But guessing the right wave is not an easy one. And if Switzerland wants to continue to be the #1 country in innovation, I'm going to repeat that, Switzerland is the #1 country in innovation, then we need to become even better surfers, despite the fact that we have no beaches. Last but not least, one more topic that's important when it comes to Innoswiss's activities for the future is diversity. Last year, the Federal Council gave a very clear remit to CTI and now Innoswiss in the BFI Botschaft, don't ask me to translate that, to create ways in order to increase gender diversity in the Swiss entrepreneurial world. The other week, I was at the Swiss Startup Day in Bern. It's one of the leading platforms in the Swiss startup ecosystem. But if you looked around the room, only a handful of female entrepreneurs were among the startups, the jury, or the participants. So pretty much the exact opposite of what I'm looking at right now. Interestingly, a third of participants in the CTI entrepreneurship training courses that we provide around the country, a third are women. But only 9% of the startups that have achieved the CTI label actually have women in their management teams. What's going wrong, ladies? That's a question for you. At CTI, we've conducted a lot of research, and we've begun to outline which kind of actions we think we can take in order to support companies to increase the diversity of their teams. And you'll be hearing more about these opportunities next year. In comparison, last weekend, the Innoswiss board joined Johann Schneider-Ammann on an innovation trip to Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. During one presentation from a company in the West Bank, they complained, I'm going to repeat that, they complained about the fact that they only have 26% female engineers. You can imagine the looks on the faces of the Swiss delegation in the room. I wish I'd taken a photograph. I was very impressed with the efforts that the Israelis and the Palestinians make in order to get both boys and girls interested in science at a very young age and support them all the way through. I was impressed with a huge mix of 50-50 men and women in all of the courses at the universities, and particularly a very high number of female entrepreneurs in both areas, Israeli areas and the Palestinian areas, in leading their startups and creating new jobs. Now, admittedly, I got the impression in the Palestinian areas it was more an act of desperation. If you don't work to create jobs and give hope to the people in the country, then things look pretty desperate. But still, born out of a necessity, it's still an impressive image when you walk around the various universities and startup campuses and get a real impression about what's happening. Homogeneous teams may feel easier to manage, but they are in fact more detrimental to the long-term success of companies. Empirical studies have shown that companies that have diverse teams are much more likely to have larger than average financial returns and more likely to develop more sustainable long-term businesses. And that brings me back to VibWife. We continue to work hard and to be able to help entrepreneurs such as Anna and Tobias to overcome the hurdles and be successful. That's what CTI has been all about. Innoswiss will continue to capitalize on past success and create newer opportunities to broaden innovation and expand support for innovation in Switzerland. But there still remains so much underutilized potential, in particular from the female population of Switzerland. And we will play our part in finding and nurturing it for the benefit of us all. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for staying with us. Nobody fell asleep during this speech of Todi. Thank you very much. I had the pleasure of being in Israel myself with Mr. Blankart, at that time leading a delegation, and we visited the Weizmann Institute. They told us also how they got more engineers. They just put on every bus stop, they don't have trams in Israel, "We want you as an engineer." And they had immediately an influx of people, ladies and men, who wanted to become engineers. And I think this is something this country lacks. And maybe that's done better in Singapore and other parts of Asia, and that leads me to the next speaker. We have Soo-Boon Ko, who will address us on Rising Asia, Opportunities for Entrepreneurs. If I may introduce you, Soo-Boon, you are the founder and managing partner based in Singapore for iGlobal Partners. You're the fund manager in venture capital with top results, and always in the top quartile, as you may read. You have a very strong banking background. You're especially very well connected in the Chinese world, also a member of even on the council of the Chinese Chamber of Commerce in Singapore, and you're a promoter of diversity on private and public boards. You're a recipient of the Outstanding Women Organization Award in 2016 in Thailand. So, ladies and gentlemen, Soo-Boon. Thank you.
How do I press? Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It gives me great pleasure to be invited to speak at the Female Founder Summit 2017. This is something very close to my heart. I recall the time in late 80s when I was one of very few women and Asian VC in the Silicon Valley. It was a very lonely job. It is getting better now. There are more female entrepreneurs and VCs. Today, I'm here to share with you my journey as a global female technopreneur. I feel wonderful to be back in Switzerland. Actually, I have many years of association with Switzerland and Europe. When I was a VC with Singapore Technology Group, I set up its European operation in London in 1996. At that time, we made several investments in France and Germany and achieved excellent returns. When I started iGlobal Partners in year 2000, our European office was initially in Frankfurt, and we later moved to Zurich. In 2006, I was invited to the board of Swissnix Singapore chapter as its local director. I was with them for more than 10 years. Let me start with a real life story. Do I have something? There's a Swiss company known as Usborg Holding, based in Taville and in the GPS chip business. It was founded by a professor from ETH, Professor Gerhard Troster, with his PhD students. uBlocks was set up in 1997 and funded by local Swiss VCs. When the internet bubble burst in early 2000, uBlocks was still bleeding. At a chance meeting at a global technology conference in Singapore in 2003, Partners Group asked if iGlobal would be interested to invest in a GPS company in Switzerland. I had not invested in Switzerland before, but I was open to the idea of coming to Switzerland to look at uBlocks. iGlobal became the sole investor in that round in January of 2004 at a very attractive valuation. Since year 2004, China and Japan became two largest growth markets for uBlocks. Asian revenue grew rapidly, and it became 40% of the total revenue of uBlocks at the time when they went for IPO at the Swiss stock market in October of 2007. Today, uBlocks is a successful story in the tech world in the Swiss investment community. I just checked their market capitalization. It's over 1.3 billion, and it's a leader in the IoT space. So what was the secret of success in this Swiss company. Why was I so confident to invest in u-blox when others were nervous at that time? Basically, there are three factors. If you look at the right-hand side. First is the VC expertise. u-blox is in the semiconductor business. This is a sector I'm very familiar with. I had been intimately involved with the semiconductor industry in the United States. In 1987, I moved to Silicon Valley and was involved with Singapore Technology Group's investment in semiconductor technology transfer project. The objective was to bring technology expertise from Silicon Valley to Singapore. Our technology investment partner was Sequoia Capital. I had been investing in semiconductor companies and helped them, their founders, to expand to the Asian market. As I'm familiar with the supply chain of the semiconductor industry, this was how I built cross-border experience. I brought US company to Asia for expansion. I was confident that I could help another fellow semiconductor company to Asia, but this time a Swiss company. Second factor is about people. It is especially true when you're in the high-tech business. Technology itself will not help you to make money. It is the people, their passion, dreams, and their ability to execute. Startup cannot afford to have uncommitted people on board. I have a favorite quote from a well-known author, Jim Collins, from his best-selling book, Good to Great. Get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people in the right seat. Prior to 2004, u-blox has its Asia office in Hong Kong. A Chinese-American person was in charge, but he was not very effective. After iGlobe invested in 2004, I worked with Thomas Seller, the CEO of u-blox, to recruit a new head of Asia Pacific. We put the headquarters in Singapore, but basically Monday to Friday, he's out in the market in Japan, in Taiwan, in China. Adrian Tan was the right choice. He had the necessary EQ skills to work with the Chinese customers. In less than 4 years, u-blox Asia business was more than 40% of his revenue. And yesterday I checked the annual report for 2016. The Asia revenue was 50%. I cannot oversize the importance of getting the right people on board. Third, customer is number one. Under Thomas' leadership, he would visit Asia customers with Adrian to find out the special requirements of his new customer in Asia. If there were needs for changes to the u-blox product, he would immediately instruct his R&D team in Taville to make changes immediately. He placed the needs of his customer above everything. So what I'll share with you the rest of today will be opportunities in Asia and the role of women entrepreneur. Asia is a faster growing economic region as compared to US and Europe. Today, we want to focus on China and ASEAN. I think we talk a lot about China, but I think people forget about ASEAN. I think CTI, I thought I saw something missing, the network in Singapore and ASEAN, which I think I'll fill in on this. China in particular has become an economic giant as compared to 20 years ago. In the 90s, the Chinese central government and local state government opened their doors wide and welcomed foreign technology companies. They gave tax incentive for foreign companies to form joint ventures with local enterprises. Foreign companies which have benefited from their expansion in China for the last 20 years. These include Cisco, Ericsson, Nokia, Oracle, Microsoft, majority of the automotive industry, from Toyota, General Motors, BMW, blah, blah, blah. All of them make good money. Today, the Chinese have already built solid infrastructures. They have superhighway, bullet speed train, and high-rise signature buildings by world-class designers that exceeded the standard of many Western countries. They've also learned the skill set of foreign partners. Their young people with brilliant minds have gone to top US universities in the US and Europe. Many of them have returned to China. More importantly, what the Western worlds do not have is scale. China has large population and its demand come in big numbers. They can now do the same job faster and cheaper. They have a huge pool of human resources in the inner provinces with much lower labor costs. China is a juggernaut in everything and also in the tech world. Let me talk about ASEAN. This is another attractive region for European counterparts. ASEAN is the association of Southeast Asia countries with 10 member countries, including Singapore. This is a region which has been much neglected by the Western countries in the past. Due to the rapid economic growth in recent years, the ASEAN countries have become very attractive even for the Chinese and the Japanese company. So the Europeans, please hurry, especially the Swiss guys. Now, choose the right technology for the ASEAN market. Do you have superior technology that can serve the needs of Asian customers? I would like to share with you the Frost & Sullivan report on the top 50 emerging technologies. These technologies trends will transform the future world with their far-reaching impact on business, economics, society, cultures, and personal life. I'm sure you're looking at these to strategize and figure out how to take advantage of this. Now, I reclassify that technology map into what I think that the Swiss can take advantage of. If you look at this chart, you notice that the top universities in Switzerland, ETH, EPFL, has been carrying out deep research into many of these technologies. In February 2017, Times Higher Education published in League Table of the World that the most international universities is ETH, and EPFL come number 2. And we have heard earlier on that Switzerland has a lot of innovation. So I think the Swiss entrepreneur should focus on your strength, and you have core competency in deep tech. Let me suggest 3 areas to focus on. One is synthetic biology. The whole world is facing critical issues that stem from a rapidly aging population. This means that health will be a major issue moving forward. ASEAN countries are not spared. I believe Switzerland is already in advanced research in the area of stem cell and DNA. Switzerland can nurture synthetic biology. This is an emerging area that leverages on Swiss ability to integrate biology, engineering, and chemistry to create new products and processes. Your deep knowledge of biological system and innovation in academia and multidisciplinary capability will place you at the forefront of this new market sector. The next step is to be able to develop this new technology for commercial use by partnering initially with your own largest Swiss or European partners for pilot run. We will later on discuss how do you seek international cooperation with Asian partners to enter their territories. Number 2, environment and sustainability. China's rapid industrialization came at the expense of its environment and public health. It is the world's largest emission of greenhouse gases and uses coal for 2/3 of their energy generation. China is known to face water depletion, air and soil pollution. The Chinese government is now pushing to cut its carbon emission and turning to renewable energy and wind energy for clean energy generation. In recent years, China has stepped forward to be part of the 2015 Paris Agreement, where 195 countries signed a breakthrough accord. Switzerland and Europe are known as market leaders in environment and sustainability industry. In this market sector, you have special expertise and also brand recognition to win the Asian market. One example is Royal DSM invented Clean Cow, which is a feed additive that reduces methane emission from cows by over 25% when added to cow feed. This topic on environment and sustainability will be discussed in the next panel discussion. Today, Switzerland prides itself as the world leader in the financial services sector. This scenario is changing very rapidly, and it will be caused by the disruption brought about by AI and robotic technology. New fintech companies will be threatening the dominance of existing financial institutions. E-payment is the increasing use of cell phone penetration is influencing the growth of mobile payments. Crowdfunding, alternative lending channels are being developed by bypassing banking system. Asia is recording exponential growth in crowdfunding market. Online insurance sales using big data and predictive analysis. New online insurance companies are able to make quick assessment of underwriting risk of insurance to better serve their customer. P2P lending are competitive to existing banking lendings, and the list goes on. China has made significant strides in the area of fintech and insurtech, and I will even venture to say that China is the undisputed global leader of financial fintech, displacing even Silicon Valley. I'm sure you have heard of BAT. Who are they? Anyone? Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. They are called the BAT. BAT dominates the China internet consumer market. They are in e-commerce, messaging, online payment, Alipay, WePay. They are competitors and also collaborators. In some situations, they come together to form joint venture to create new online insurance and online financial services company so as to compete with the top 5 Chinese banks. In other situations, they do compete with each other. I do not believe that the Swiss bank can provide new financial services to China or ASEAN. However, there is some silver lining, as Swiss can perhaps play a key role in blockchain and crypto market. I heard that there's a crypto valley in Zug. It's interesting to note that the attitude of the Swiss authority in allowing ICOs, the US and China authorities are banning ICOs. Hence, this could be an area that Swiss might be able to excel over the next few years. Nurture it well. Next, I'd like to talk about choose your battlefield and business partners. Maybe I'll touch upon something that is my observation on culture. My observation about the Swiss culture is that Swiss people are very nice, humble, polite, perfectionist, a bit conservative, and tend to undersell themselves. In today's chaotic world and competitive world in Asia, I feel the Swiss entrepreneur might have to make some changes to themselves and to be open-minded and more promotional about themselves. They should leverage on the Swiss long-reputed quality and brand recognition to promote its new product. They have to move to the fast lane, not stay in the slow lane. Because when you're such perfectionist, by the time you finish your product, the situation changes. Now, next, I think it's important to readjust your business model depending on the marketplace. We heard today about innovation, and you are top innovators. So what? If it stays in the lab, if you just go to a small market, you don't create any impact. But you can. You need to adjust. Question is, how do you scale a business in the mass market? Asia customer want good and cheap product with fast turnaround. So can you do that? You must work with improving operational processes in Asia to achieve lower price, to scale, and to dominate the market. You really want to dominate the market. I think the other important factor is choice of partners, and it goes back to people. And I want to emphasize again that Swiss have very good reputation. Product is reliable, safe, and you should really think about how to leverage on that. But the rest is you have to be quick, right? You cannot wait for your time. Now, in choosing partners, I want to recommend, of course I'm biased, Singapore is known to be Switzerland of the East in the financial sector. However, Singapore don't have that deep technology. You have the deep technology. What Singapore is good at is you are known traditionally, we are a very good manufacturing hub and distribution hub for many of the US and European companies. For the last 30 years, Apple, HP, all the European brand names, Western Digital, they have at one point in time used Singapore as a manufacturing hub. When the prices gone up, the Singaporean manufacturer actually moved to the neighboring countries. So they operate, Singapore is the headquarters, they move it to Shanghai operation and then move it inwards, go to Vietnam and all that. So they have the ability to do manufacturing in scale with the Chinese guy. And also they are bridged to the bigger ASEAN market. Today, ASEAN market is really very attractive. Indonesia, they have 250 million population, and it's coming up. Vietnam and all this, right? So in order to expand in the ASEAN market, there are actually many European and US companies already set up operation in Singapore. Singapore is a headquarter, it's not a marketplace. More importantly, it's because we believe in IP protection. And that's the difference between Singapore and China. So unless your IP is really rock solid, the Chinese guy, while the market is big, when you're not yet ready, depending on how big or how small you are, when the market is not ready, they will just reverse engineer. So Singaporean is kind of a bit stupid, but they are totally honest. Over the last 15 years, Singapore has invested heavily and built biotech hub to house major research companies. I mean, the Novartis, all the top biotech companies are there in Singapore to do research. And more importantly, we have open policy for foreign researchers in Singapore. And we also welcome foreign employees. The National Research Agency has allocated $1 billion a year in technology funding to build their whole ecosystem. According to Startup Gymno report, Silicon Valley is ranked #1, and Singapore is ranked #12 in 2016. So Singapore can be complementary to the Swiss, as both the country, the skill sets are very complementary to each other. Singapore is also best known to be a leader in Asia in medical service area to provide quality service for the aging population for people around that area. So including some of the Chinese politicians, if they want to, cure themselves, if they sometimes come to Singapore as well. So I want to mention another last point is that Singapore also have bilateral agreement with respective ASEAN countries on tax treaty. So when you set up Asia headquarters in Singapore, they tend to be pretty effective. Now let me turn to the role of female entrepreneur in the tech world. A few words on female founders. According to my experience, the world of technology and entrepreneurship is gender biased. That means against the woman. In Asia world, there are very few women founder CEOs. Many women are in senior position as COO and CFO, especially in the banking world. There are a lot of women who just number two. So they cannot break the glass ceiling. I have not seen any Singaporean bank whose CEO is a woman CEO. That's why I left the bank, because I think I'm too good. And I left that 30 years ago. And I love to be my own boss. Because you don't do rubbish thing, but the real boss is my shareholder, since I'm a venture capitalist. So I think part of the reason why, these statistics show, because a lot of parents, they don't educate their daughters in STEMs, and they have less exposure. So increasingly, even in Singapore, they are pushing very hard in the education side. The challenge of many politicians, and we as parents, how do we educate our next generation? What will be future industry? Today, the industry we look at, we are in, it will disappear with robots, with AIs. So they have to be trained very differently. Like I just saw a video from Jack Ma. He said that, we should train robot as robot and human as human. So those repetitive work should be done by robot. So free the time for human being to have a bit more leisure and do the real value-added stuff. So one observation in Singapore is that the women, the younger ladies, they could be trained in any discipline, but they want to be entrepreneur. Unlike our days, where we go and get a safe job. So the regret I have is that I didn't have a mentor. So I kind of work for corporation. Until one day I find that I'm too aggressive for the corporation. So, I just slowly move myself out. So I would say that today I do a lot of mentoring. I probably spend about 20% of my time mentor both men and women, but principally more women. And it doesn't take a lot of time to do mentoring, because what you have to do, and these ladies are very motivated, you just give them guidance, and they'll pick up whatever, and they have to make their own decision at the end of the day. So in conclusion, I would like to highlight that Asians like to work with people whom they could trust. They make long-term friends and will not abandon them in difficult times. That's the culture. Swiss female founders can leverage on the Women Trust Network to do global business. Today, talent is mobile, money is also mobile, entrepreneurs are connected, consumers are connected, and the cost of starting a new venture is low. Entrepreneurs must go beyond their shores to globalize and to seek new markets. In conclusion, I will welcome all of you to use Singapore as a first stop, and then bring your innovation and your charm to Asia. Singapore is a gateway to Asia, and we welcome you to come. I look forward to answering whatever questions. Thank you.
questions, yes. So please, if the audience is right and ready, there's people with a microphone, I suppose, which would be ready to take your, yes, people is Carol.
I will run around.
Yeah. So anybody with a question? Please, Laurent, here in the first row.
Yeah, thanks for the inspiring talk. Of course, I know a lot about Singapore, but you didn't mention the education part. I think this is something that Singapore does differently, education. You mentioned that women today, girls are ready to go into all kind of career, but it's because of the education system and what steps the government has taken there for a long time that maybe could inspire other governments to follow and actually is.
Sorry, your question is, I didn't mention about the education system?
What innovative education steps has the Singapore government taken over the last 5-10 years to create this new generation of entrepreneurs that are willing to take risks, both on the women and the men's side?
Oh, okay. I think what is actually very interesting is that everybody wants to copy Silicon Valley, and it's actually very hard. Because it's all about open-mindedness, right? So about 10 years ago, the university actually launched a program. So the university is actually 4 years. So what they do is they actually have cooperation with Stanford University. So the student will study, not all the students, they will select the better students, and they will study for 3 years. Then they have an option to go to Silicon Valley to work with startup company for 1 year. During this 1 year, they will go to Stanford and take classes. And you cannot say that you are from Stanford University, but you can actually collect credits. But the fact that they had exposure for that 1 year to really witness the startup environment, and by the fact that in Silicon Valley, so they actually learn very fast. So almost like you can say they got the startup bugs. So when they come back, probably half of them wanted to do the startup company. So I think it's a cultural change. It's not going to take 1 month. It's not going to take 2 years. It is like virus, It just get on to you. And also because the family nowadays are a bit more comfortable, so they give the kids the choices of doing what they want. The parents will say, just do whatever that makes you happy. And so when you're not married, when you just come out from university, they just go try out because the opportunity cost is very little. And today, the younger generation, they don't compare so much about really they need to earn how much money. There are some who cares, so they join investment banking. Some who doesn't care because they want to make a lot of money. They think they are going to be a Facebook. They have their own dream. And there will be failures, but it's okay. So people, I think Singaporeans are also opening up. I think the other social factor that's helping the ladies in Singapore is the boys or the men at the age of 18 years old, they go for national service. So they lost out 2 years. And after that, they go to university. So by the time the men come back to work in the corporate world, their classmate will be the man's boss, which is actually very interesting, right? So the social scene is actually changing. And because Singapore have about 50% male and 50% female, and the culture is that even when you get married, you actually still continue to work. So we have a social support system where the Singapore government allow us to import maids. So our maids will come from the Philippines, come from Indonesia. So the woman actually can go out and work. So even after they have babies, they will still work. Even my secretary, she will work. And then she will rather pay someone, a maid at home, to take care of the household stuff, right? But of course, in future, maybe the robots will do the household job. So I think typically Singaporean woman doesn't like to stay at home and scrub the floor. So it's kind of social thing, kind of cultural thing. And I know when I was with the Singapore Chinese Chamber of Commerce, I organized an event, the Swiss Women with the Swiss Women Association. So the Swiss women are actually expatriate from Switzerland. Either they follow their husband to Singapore, and most of the time we were told that the husband didn't like them to work. So they actually admire the Singaporean woman and said, you know, don't understand why their Swiss husband don't want them to work, which they are very capable as well. So I think it's a cultural thing. Maybe over time, the Swiss men will change their mind, because if you have two income, why not? You have two engines running. So why allow one engine to run where you have two to run?
Thank you very much. If I may, can we adjourn here, because then we can through this program. Thank you very much, Subu. A very inspiring speech, because one can see how the different countries, Switzerland, Singapore, how we do things differently. I read in a report, I think of McKinsey, that if all men and women worked in equal parts, the world GDP would grow by 25%, from 107 trillion to 130 trillion. So I think this is what you mentioned, and that's very interesting to hear. Now, I'm happy to introduce Johanna Ehrenroth with the next speech. We haven't met, so welcome. Nice to see you. I will say something about you. We speak about the importance of women's economic empowerment. And if I may introduce a little bit, I understand you work closely with Percy Barnevik, which is very well known here in Switzerland because of his association with Asea Brand-Boveri. And of course, the Swedes also, I always think, have a very similar trait like us Swiss. They are very hardworking and they focus on the job, and probably they are also modest, as Subun said before. You are a fundraising and events volunteer of the philanthropic Hand in Hand International. And yourself, you're a philanthropist. You helped the homeless, HIV, sick people, and you did other good things. You ran an NGO. So I wish you great fun in speaking to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Take out, step on the box. Great. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for that very nice introduction. I'm Johanna Ehrenroth, and as mentioned, I'm a supporter, volunteer, and patron of the charity Hand in Hand International. I'm very delighted to be here in a room full of women entrepreneurs, and this is because Hand in Hand is all about women entrepreneurs. However, perhaps not all of you have heard of Hand in Hand. In fact, I'm often told it's the biggest charity I've never heard of. So let me tell you a little bit about it. Hand in Hand helps poor women, helps them to start their own businesses, earn money, and work themselves out of poverty. In short, to become entrepreneurs, a bit like yourselves, but in very different circumstances. We were set up in 2003, and we have operated in 14 countries so far. And to date, we have helped 2 million people, mostly women, get jobs, and in addition, 2 million businesses and 3 million jobs. I always mess this up. And to put that into context, 3 million jobs, that makes us one of the biggest employers in the world, only second to the United States Defense Department, and bigger than the People's Liberation Army of China, which only have 2.3 million employees. So if you imagine that with each woman that is supported through Hand in Hand will support approximately 5 family members, that means that the income from all the Hand in Hand entrepreneurs has helped over 11 million people worldwide. We give women the business skills that they need to become micro-entrepreneurs, so they can earn enough money so they can feed their families. Sorry. Now, this all began with Percy Barnevik, Oh, well, there he is. He's probably, as mentioned, familiar to many of you. He spent many years living here in the Zurich area. He's the one who masterminded the merger that created ABB, as well as the merger of AstraZeneca. He's also served on many boards and various positions. He, at the time, was one of the most influential and powerful businessmen of his era. However, Percy often says that Hand in Hand is his last, his biggest, and his most important job. During his time running major corporations, Barnevik spent a lot of time in developing countries. And he was never one to sit still, and he still isn't. He was often taking walks around the areas. And he would notice that although the factories that he was building would provide thousands of jobs, millions of jobs were needed. And the slums might have been busy with lots of activity. There wasn't a lot of jobs. And without the jobs, there wasn't a lot of future. And in particular, he witnessed the problem of child labor, and that families were being forced to sell their children into bonded labor. And he found this very, very disturbing. And so initially, he would buy the children out of their contracts and send them back to their families. However, there were two big problems with this. First of all, there were so many children that he couldn't rescue all of them. Second, when he would go back 6 months, 12 months later, these same children were back at the factories as before. These parents had no choice. And as Percy often says, you cannot discuss ethics, meaning the ethics of selling your children, on an empty stomach. So buying children out of bonded labor, Barnevik realized, was actually treating the symptom and not the cause. What the parents needed was the ability to earn an income, and then they wouldn't need to sell their children for food. And Barnevik also realized that it was the women who were going to make this happen. This is about fundamental human rights, but it's also about basic economics. We know from a lot of research in the development world that women will spend on average 80% of their income on their families and their children. The corresponding figure for men is only 40%. Percy spends a lot of time saying he only likes women, and there's a reason. In fact, when you empower a woman, you empower a generation. Yet, globally, only half of all working-age women are in the labor force. So back to Barnevik. Jobs, and jobs for women in particular, is the answer. But where will all these jobs come from? As you can see, yes, right slide, thanks, Anne. From this slide, that neither the government nor the private sector can provide the 600 million jobs that are needed in the next decade. And in fact, the World Economic Forum at Davos has identified unemployment as one of the top 4 biggest dangers facing the world right now. So what we need to do is we need to help people to help themselves, to work their own way out of poverty. And the way that we do this, what we believe at Hand in Hand, is through entrepreneurship, mass entrepreneurship. And to do this, what people need, and particular women, is confidence, capacity, and capital. So the question now is, how do we invest in women, and how do we create the jobs needed? So allow me to tell you, illustrate what we do by telling you a bit about Maida, beautiful Maida in Rwanda. She lives in a small home, very modest, with bare walls and an earthen floor. There's no running water, there's no electricity, no shops, no market, and no employers. When Hand in Hand came to her village, she joined the group and found not just basic business education, but friendship and confidence that comes from being a part of a group or a team. Maida realized that many of her friends had mobile phones, but the only way to charge their phones was a very long walk to the next village. So, encouraged by her group and armed with her new business knowledge and guided by Hand in Hand, Maida borrowed from the group's savings pot and invested in a solar panel and a car battery. She set herself up as the local electricity supplier, charging a small fee for people to charge their mobile phones. Very quickly, the loan was paid off, and Maida's business was booming. In fact, she's even diversified and now offers hairdressing as well. Today, Maida and Maida's 4 children go to school, so they can escape the poverty that Maida knew as a child. And just like all of us, Maida takes great pride in the success of her micro-business and her ability to contribute to the well-being of her family, just like all of us. So how does it work? Hand in hand, we work in 4 stages. The first stage, we set up groups. We call them self-help groups, and they meet approximately once a week. When the group is well established, with a constitution and a self-appointed secretary and a leader, the members begin saving just a few cents every week. And that you can imagine that a group with 20 members saving a few cents every week will produce a useful savings pot quite quickly. But why is saving so important? The answer is, if you're not saving, you're not controlling your money. Many of the people we work with are farmers and work with agriculture, where it's very unreliable and unpredictable flows of income. And one of our members in Rwanda told us that she would go to the market and she would go there to buy salt, but then she would see some tomatoes and buy those as well. And since joining hand in hand, when she goes to the market, she now only buys what she needs and saves the rest. And that has made a big difference to her family. The next stage is business training. When working with the very poor, you're also working with mostly illiterate people. So how do we manage this? Well, we use pictures, parables, and songs. A bit like perhaps, in the churches and the stained glass windows of how they used to teach the Bible. A quick look at these drawings, and you can see quite a lot. For example, where the 2 donkeys are pulling in different directions. I can imagine all of you have encountered this situation during your working life, and I think our ladies can very much relate to this. The third stage is access to credit. As we all know, one of the biggest hurdles in starting any business is investment, and this is no different for our micro-entrepreneurs. You'll remember I mentioned the member savings pot? Well, for most of our women, this is what will provide the seed funding for their businesses. The average loan from the group savings pot is around $30 to $40 US. So guided by us, they present a basic business plan to the group, and as a group, they decide whether or not to invest and the terms of the loan. It's rather sophisticated financial products, often in very rural areas. The fourth stage is links to markets. Here you can see a picture of Alice in Kenya and her beautiful tomato farm. But sometimes the businesses go on to become bigger and bigger, and then the group savings pot perhaps is not enough. And in that instance, we will connect our people to our internal enterprise incubation fund or to commercial microfinance institutions. We help them find bigger local markets and shops in which to sell their products. Our women that we train start very many diverse micro-businesses, and you can see some photos here. And our numbers are very impressive, and for this, we have Barnavik to thank. He applied his business knowledge and his years of experience to create a job creation model that is low cost, scalable, and that can be exported to different countries. Barnavik is also a firm believer in devolving power. He developed a network where local offices are empowered to use their local expertise and knowledge to deliver the hand-in-hand vision of mass entrepreneurship. And the results are very sustainable. When we work with communities and we move on, those entrepreneurs and those businesses continue and thrive. In fact, we know from research that 97% of our businesses are still going 3 years later. And we are immensely grateful to donors such as the British and Swedish governments, companies such as Johnson & Johnson and UBS, and foundations such as the IKEA Foundation. It is they, along with many private donors, who have made our training possible. So now that I've told you a little bit about hand in hand and how we work and the success that we've had. I must add that I'm incredibly proud to be associated with such a fine charity, especially as everything is very accountable. What we do is a one-off. We don't give away anything. We give them training which gives them opportunities. So you might, and I hope, are thinking, how can I help? So allow me to give you a few ideas. For example, in Kenya, there is currently a terrible drought, and food security is a big problem. A gift of $1,300 would allow 10 Kenyan women to learn eco-farming techniques, such as train them in drought-resistant farming techniques. And this, in consequence, would transform the lives of approximately 40 people. Next, in Tanzania, where we're just launching our new program, we have a focus on youth unemployment. And that's because Tanzania has a lot of youth that is unemployed. And we're hoping to complete our match funding that we have received from Boeing in order to launch this program in Moshi, Tanzania, where a large portion of the members will be under 25. Finally, Afghanistan. Now, there are some obvious challenges for working in Afghanistan. However, Hand in Hand has been there already for a decade and has had great success. We are very established there, and we have a very high percentage of women participating in our programs, much higher than most NGOs. We've launched a 2-year Afghan village project where you would have the chance to not help just one family, but lift an entire Afghan village out of poverty. So thank you very, very much for your time and attention. I hope that I've sparked an interest in Hand and given you a bit of insight to the pride our women feel at starting their own businesses, just like yourselves. And finally, I look forward to meeting you for a drink out there where my colleague Anne, my very helpful colleague Anne, would be very happy to answer your questions or receive your comments about the things that you've heard this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Now we go from highlight to highlight, and I'm very happy that the next speaker is, if I may refer to you as our Carol Hoffmann. Of course, I'm very fond of, as you can say. Not only has she invited me to be your host tonight, but also I think you do an incredible lot behind the scenes. And you engineer a lot of things. I can just also say what you do. For example, you were co-founder and president, or you are actually, the president of the Female Founders Summit, which we are now present, but you're also the founder and president of Women's Way Association, a network where more than 10,000 women are connected. Then you're yourself extremely much connected in Switzerland, but also abroad, in the US and other places. You know, private offices, family offices, investors. So in principle, one can talk to you from many areas and you always know an answer. And you built a number of businesses and large projects in software, web, and in the mobile area. So thank you very much for speaking to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ariel. No. Well, this quick session is actually meant to be a warm-up for the panel, which will follow. And I put together a few inputs in terms of future technologies for you. Maybe let's start with this human evolution prediction. I quite like this because it has a frightful end, sort of. And at the moment, what we're looking at, we already have robot toys. Soon we're going to be in an age where we're going to have robot friends, robot boyfriends, robot girlfriends maybe. And eventually we will develop ourselves into some sort of robots. This is just the prediction that we're looking at the moment. And also, if you look at space, there's a lot of investments going at the moment into space technologies. So it actually makes sense to think about cyborgization if you want to travel in space. But we'll take some time until we get there. Now, to understand a bit what is actually driving this whole technology change, we have to look a bit back and have a look at how humanity has actually evolved. our Earth has formed 4.5 billion years ago, and then not much actually happened. And then about 500 million years ago, life as we know it formed. It is called the Cambrian explosion. And it took until about 2.5 million years ago until something like humans appeared. The genus Homo was actually formed itself about 2.5 million years ago. Now, nothing really much happened for 2.5 million years. So I had to actually put 3 time scales in this graph, so it makes it's a bit condensed, but not really much happened. And then we started sort of invent things. About 400,000 years ago, we invented the wheel. No, that's not true, it's fire. First, well, we did not invent it, we found it. And around 100,000 years ago, we developed language. And then we really started to develop technology. And then very interesting things happened, because in a really short time, we invented so many different technological things. It's actually about 5,500 years ago where we invented the wheel. Then 3,000 before Christ, we invented the abacus, which is a calculation device. The printing press was in around 1440. Electricity in 1600, we did not invent it, we found it. We invented the steam engine in 1712, the vacuum tube in 1883, semiconductors 1896, the transistor 47, integrated circuits 1959, the internet 1969, the original ARPANET 1969, and then the microprocessor 1971. And from then onwards, basically we see a exponential explosion in technology. Everything that we call tech today was sort of invented in the last 500 years. And everything we call high tech was invented in the last 50 years. And I'm thinking that this population explosion that we see sort of in parallel, it led to what we call labor division. So it allowed for the really smart brains to basically not just occupy themselves with making a living, but to also go into research. So that's where all this stuff comes from. And the exponential growth of technology actually started when we started to invent computing. This is a logarithmic scale. Computing power is actually measured in terms of calculations per second per 1,000 US dollars. And to put this a bit more into perspective, we can match this with brain power capacities of living organisms. And there's this chart from the Singularity University that's basically matching the two. So human or biological capabilities and technological capabilities. So we basically surpassed the stage where we have brain power equivalents of a mouse. We're going to sort of be able to have brain power equivalents of human beings in 2023. That's the prediction. Not sure if we're going to arrive there, but that's the prediction. And there's also the prediction that we're going to match brain power of all humans in 2055. And this is because this thing scales exponentially. Now, the interesting thing is that there's also a few issues related to this. The first one is actually electricity. Everything we know runs on electricity. So if we have some sort of, well, the first thing about electricity is we have to sort of produce it somehow. The second thing is everything that runs on electricity can be affected by electromagnetic pulses or whatever. So if our sun produces a large solar flare, we already have a problem. The third thing, if is if power is cut off for some reason, we can't even get cash from an ATM anymore because it just doesn't work. You cannot get gas from a gas station. You basically can't do anything. And I had a discussion with a politician from a small county community in Canton Aargau, and he's like, they did a risk analysis, and they're like, after 12 hours without electricity, you have the first riots. So it's pretty important to have electricity. Also, you're not going to be able to use a cell phone, because maybe your phone is still working, but the stations are basically not powered anymore. So what are you going to do? You can't even use an analogous phone anymore because all the lines are digital today. So we're pretty dependent on what we call electricity. And also in this, in front of this view, it makes a lot of sense that we have companies like Tesla trying to make us grid independent, trying to give us batteries that we can have at home, that power our houses, power everything we need in terms of electricity, just as a side note. Then the next problem. Jack Ma was speaking at the WEF this year in January. And he was like, he made an interesting comment. He was like, we have maybe 30 years. We have 30 years to change, so the next 30 years will be critical for the world. And what he was actually trying to say is, we have to solve environmental, economic, and societal challenges that lie ahead of us if you want to sort of survive in the long term on this planet. And we're going to see resource conflicts. And eventually, we could even destroy our planet if we do not do something now. And in front of this, there's also a few good news, because there's a lot of technology that is coming up that could help us solve some of the biggest issues that we have today. And I'm just going to venture in a couple of them now. So, fintech. I think it's one of the hottest topics at the moment. What is happening is that a lot of states are now starting to venture into state-backed cryptocurrencies. For example, Cash is now an official currency in Dubai. China and India are looking to have their own state-backed cryptocurrency. Estland wanted to make the S-coin, but they were basically stopped by the European Union because they only want to see the euro. Blockchain for the underbanked is a second interesting topic, goes in a bit same direction than hand in hand. Everex is one of the startups that is developing blockchain solutions on top of the existing cryptocurrencies to provide financing means for the 2 billion people that do not have access to banking now. Then maybe we're going to see digital nation states. Estonia is actually already offering an e-residency, so you can register yourself already online today as to become some sort of e-Estonian. And maybe we're going to see something like AI-based legislation. I'm always thinking, why not have artificial intelligence help us make law? Because they're anyway going to be maybe smarter than we are. Maybe they would make better legislation. I haven't found a startup in that space yet, but I'm sure it's going to be on our agenda maybe one day soon. Then clean tech. Clean tech is actually the biggest thing I think that we should focus on. One of the biggest problems we have on this planet is actually that plastics are polluting everything. If you eat fish from the sea, you're already eating plastic, actually. There's a couple of companies that are developing biodegradable plastics now. The question is, when is it going to enter the large supermarkets? When it's going to enter the large producing companies so that we can actually make a switch from non-biodegradable to biodegradable plastics? Then artificial photosynthesis would help us to produce energy. Also at a, how shall I put it, more efficient way than we do it now. There's university research that is actually being conducted on this topic. They have first results. Then there's also green fuels. There's a lot of developments in the green fuel market. On one side, using, for example, algae to produce fuels, or then recycle plastic to produce fuels, or then do CO2 capturing. We have actually a Swiss startup that is doing that. It's called Climeworks. And they're now, whoa, that was a bit fast. They're rolling out their plants at the moment, or factories. Okay, let's get to the food tech stuff. Food is actually one of the biggest contributors to CO2 emissions on the planet, because all the farming that we do, all these animals, they produce so much CO2 and other climate, how you call this? Well, hello? It's faster than I am, I'm sorry. No. All these climate active substances. So there's a lot of things going on at the moment in Silicon Valley. There's all these startups like Impossible Foods, Memphis Meats, Sunfed Meats. So Sunfed Meat is from New Zealand, but the two others are from the US. And they produce artificial meats. It's actually the burger that they already sell in the market. It's made from cells, from animals. So it's basically grown in a lab. It's not from a cow anymore. Then what's also happening is vertical farming. A lot of new city developments include a lot of vertical farming ideas and also forests in the cities to basically create better atmosphere in there. Then there's also solar farming, meaning you basically try to produce agricultural output but power it with solar energy. Then low energy water desalination. If we can desalinate water without using up so much energy as it uses today, then we could basically make all the deserts green again. We can do reforestation at a large scale. So that's one of the things that will have a big impact on us. I'm sorry, because I'm trying to put my papers here. It's always doing what it should not. Now, mobility, finally we're going to get flying cars. I mean, they were promised to us already in the 50s. And finally we're getting there. There's Airbus, Renault, Lilium, and a few more who are working in this space. And as it looks, it's going to be more like autonomous passenger drones, because who of you can fly? So even if you have a flying car, you probably have a problem because you're not allowed to fly it. So they're basically developing the things into drones that will fly you around. And then that's the most controversial part of the whole thing, the biotech advances that we see. There is already genetic editing, which has developed into biohacking. There's people who hack their own genome, because everything you need for this you can buy online today. And the more structured thing we're going to get out of this is going to be personalized medicine. Then synthetic organs, bionic limbs, it's a good development in the sense that you can basically replace things, maybe, sooner or later. Brain implants, that has been quite debated online because DARPA is actually a defense agency and they're investing quite a bit into brain implants. It's mostly for medical purposes like Parkinson treatment. But yeah, if it's a defense agency, you could also develop other ideas. No. Then delayed aging. A lot of startups are mushrooming in the United States in terms of research and finding a way to delay aging. No. So, and finally we get to space tech. I was always thinking, why do people invest in space? Because, I mean, until we get there, it just takes so much time, and we're not going to be there anymore. But they're actually thinking about mining on asteroids. So you could sort of find so many more resources that you can then use. So it's not such a bad idea. Then what sounds a bit impossible is actually something that people work on at NASA and also in China. They try to develop a warp drive. I mean, there's some theoretical problems with it, but apparently they're working on it. And then there's other people who are thinking about building new nations in space. Like there's this Asgardia project, they sort of want to build some space station that circles the Earth, where they would basically declare a new nation. Very interesting. No. Okay, so what I actually would make as a last point is that also coming back to what we do here in Europe and in Switzerland, also in regard to what Subun told us about the Asian markets, is that we, over here, we are actually very good in technology, in deep technology. Switzerland is usually always on the top of every innovation ranking list that you can find. But I'm always thinking we're not making enough impact. On this CO2 emission list, China is on the top, and we're not even on this list. But we're small, and we don't really, I mean, even if we're trying to cut our CO2 emissions in half, it would not really make much of a difference. For us, it would make. But on a global scale, it just doesn't. But we have so much technology that actually helps increase resource efficiency. And if we would start to think that we could develop these technologies in the places where there's actually big emissions, like China, okay, United States is a different situation, but globally all over the European Union, I think we could make a much bigger impact. And here another slide in regard to why Asia is actually important or should be on our agenda. China and India are changing at the moment on a big scale to renewable energy. China alone invests 360 billion into renewable energy, or they plan to by 2020. And also China is going to be the largest consumer market by 2050, larger than Europe and the US together. And if we can sort of deploy our efficiency technologies in these markets and also make the whole consumer markets more efficient in terms of resource use, it would have a really, really great impact. So, and the really last point, I'm always thinking we have so many things going on in Europe, in Switzerland, and there's so many startup organizations, there's so many events, and we should maybe try to think how we can collaborate more and work together more, because then we could create a bigger impact in the whole ecosystem. And also globally, if we collaborate more, then we can really address all those challenges that are ahead of us. And we personally, from the Female Founders Summit team, believe that women are going to be very important for this transition. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we come to the next point. We heard about electricity, how important that is and how dangerous it can be. But as you remember, perhaps the French philosopher Voltaire, a couple of 100 years ago, he said it's 3 meals a day which prevents anarchy. And so with that in mind, we come to the panel. I may ask to the podium, Subun, please, if you would take a seat. You were already introduced. Then I would like to introduce Barbara Fischer while she goes to the podium. Maybe if you take your seat from here upward, then I can sit here. Barbara Fischer is the founding partner of Arena Venture, and they are active in private placements. But before that, you were herself an entrepreneur who founded several businesses, so you can also speak in that capacity. You were active in senior management positions in many global corporations, and you were told that you eat tech for breakfast. Now, that's something digestible. Welcome on the podium. Then I read as you appear in the list. Then welcome Dalit Steiger. You have a Swiss banking background. You're the founder of Swiss Cognitive, the firm Global IRI Hub, this alternative intelligence, of course a little bit a tongue twister, of the Why-Wait LTT, you're CEO of the IT Leadership Forum, and you connect very important executives in the IT industry, and you did many other things, you're also an entrepreneur. Then finally we have Laurent Roux. You are of the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, and that's an EU organization which helps entrepreneurs and startups, so it's the counterpart probably to Trudy we heard before. Now, when we start this discussion, I would like also to encourage the audience to participate. What I would like to do now first is maybe just to ask or to make a statement and maybe hear what you say about it. I read somewhere, I think it's also the WEF, the World Economic Forum, that it is only 10 CEOs out of 359 newly appointed CEOs which are female. Why is that? When women change the economies for good, why only 10 of 359 are actually female? Maybe, Barbara, you have an idea about this? Did I catch you by surprise?
I think there's maybe two reasons. Number one, maybe women are not as ballsy as guys at selling themselves. Yes. Like men tend to, you know, even if they don't have, for example, the skills for a certain job, I think they tend to just assume that they'll grow into it. And I think there's something good about that too, because women should take that attitude sometimes as well and just say, okay, I will grow into that and I'll be able to do that.
You were saying so women should have balls. That's what you were said, yes?
Yep, they should have balls, cojones. And secondly, yeah, I think it has to do with red tape stuff. There's a reason why I'm not working for global corporations anymore. I worked with fantastic companies like Swarovski, like Löwenbräu Group in Australia, and with lithium technologies before. And I always found, I mean, especially with large corporations and also some that I consulted for, that it, you know, there's a lot of red tape, how basically certain groups promote one another, and often these groups are made up of men. And so then there's a, exactly like Sun Bu said today, like she left banking because people told her, she told me today at lunch, people told her, oh, Sun Bu, you're way too agile for banking, you're too aggressive, and so on. So she left, and she made it, so good on you.
So, Boon, what would you like to add something to that? Why is it that we don't have so many? You spoke of the glass ceiling, I know, but what can we do about this, you think?
I think women should assert themselves in a very nice way. When the woman do something, then they will say, this woman is very aggressive. You know, so there's always this biasness, right? But I think what is important for women to do well, we need the support of the men. I think that's very important. So as Asian women, sometimes I'm actually pretty low-key. Even in, you know, Chamber of Commerce and all that. I know sometimes the sensitivity is like, they don't really want you to take pictures with the minister. So I was like, I don't even care. They're not going to make my day because, you know. So I think you have to know what is their sensitivity. And then you just have to work with them. Mm-hmm. Because if you just say, oh, you know, you bang your chest and say, oh, you know, we want to be ahead of you and all that. So sometimes you just go quiet and then you just do it. And then you just plant the idea to the man and say, hey, this is your idea. You know, if you say that it's my idea, and then you turn around and say, I told you so, and they won't be very happy. So you just have to use different kind of tactic to make them feel comfortable.
Thank you very much. Maybe Dalit, before we come to Laurent, what do you have your own? Yeah, what do you say?
I don't know if it works. Yeah, it works.
Yes.
Thanks. Honestly, I would rather not talk about the numbers than more about how can we empower and enable the women to get into these C-level or executive levels. Because what we discussed already, I mean, it's not about the numbers, it's more about what are our skills. We do have the soft skills. We do have competences that are actually the synergies to the man's world, and it's all about diversity. It doesn't really mean that it needs to be only about women. It's also about different nationalities. And honestly, I would rather talk about that than about numbers, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm. I think, Sun Bu, you said somehow something that you ladies, you should somehow do something and take your life in your hands, but I think it's also us men who should perhaps do something. What do you think, Laurent? What's your position?
Sure, and some of us are. Thanks for the question. So what we do at EIT on the topic of women leadership and entrepreneurship, so first of all, we are a European body of the Commission under DG EAC, so Education and Culture, but we are an integral part of the Horizon 2020 program. And we invest a lot of money on behalf of the Commission in innovation entrepreneurship, and we build these large communities around societal challenges. So all the things that we heard that Europe and the world are facing, we're trying to solve it through innovation. And because we have these communities, we have many role models. So we work on two sides to try to change the statu quo, and some industries that are very dominated by men, digital, for example. So we try to do it at the earlier age, education side, where we try to inspire the next generation of girls to be interested in STEM, in creativity, in working in teams, in finding role models, understanding that there are support network, the networking possibilities for them to at least consider these type of careers. And then we work on the higher end, where we invest the money of the Commission, and we ask our communities to really set targets for themselves in terms of women participation in leadership position, in investment activities, in the number of female founders they support, the number of female graduates they graduate in their different programs, and so on. And we try to have ambitious targets with them, realistic as well in some sectors, because we know we're not going to go from 15% to 45% overnight. So even 25% in 5 years or 10 years is already a big, big change. And because we have this money that we can invest, we can kind of track and make sure that this money is well invested to try to rebalance some sectors like digital and energy and so on. I mean, I can cite many sectors where this would have a big impact on the prosperity of the countries as we
So today. We can also apply in Brussels?
Of course. So of course, we have many Swiss partners, many education universities, also participant in innovation projects as part of the Horizon 2020. It's a little bit separate program, but we are part of the Horizon 2020.
Maybe I can ask Dalit, which areas you think women can make an impact going forward, or what do you observe from your viewpoint?
Will have impact on?
On the growth. How shall I say? Where are women best suited to add value, if that's the right way how to put it?
From a women perspective, I think it's definitely our soft skills and the communication. It's about negotiation. It's about bringing the right partners together. And I think it's not always about the expertise on a certain subject, is actually to find out who are the right experts, who are the right stakeholders and counterparties, and bring those guys together. And I think this is exactly what makes us different. And we need a diversity through gender, through nationalities, through different cultures, and this is what it is all about. And what you just said at the beginning is like we have to empower, we have to enable the young women to stand up and also to believe in what they can contribute. And I think this is at the end what it's all about.
We discussed this with some of you because the problem always is how do you get this done? I mean, we heard about Israel, how they do this with women. I know that in this country we discussed that we have quotas on board level and all these things. I personally, as a liberal person, I think it should not be quotas, it should be skills. But what do you think, Barbara? How should we go forward and help in this case?
Well, I see, part of the problem, in my opinion, starts in not just in the younger generation, it starts in our generation. So women 60, 50, 40, whatever. So basically the mothers of today or grandmothers. Because I give you an example. So before I came in here today, I was talking to a female founder just outside. And she was telling me, yeah, now I've started my business 6 months ago. I've got a fantastic husband supporting me. I've got 2 great kids, 8 and 4 years old. And the business, let's see about it. I'm probably never going to turn a millionaire with it, but that's fine. So when I hear things like that, I tell you, really, my heart is saddened, or I get really sad from women saying these things. Or, for example, saying, like I spoke to a Berlin entrepreneur a couple of weeks ago. She's building a fantastic business in the tech industry. It's scaling very nicely. She's in her early 30s. I was asking her about her pain points, like what are the kinds of things you are struggling with? What would you like to see improved? Because I used to be an entrepreneur, so I'm interested in what other entrepreneurs are struggling with. So, and then she's telling me, I'm saying to her, so what about kids? When are you going to have, because she told me about her fiancé and so on. And she said, you know what, Barbara? My business is so fantastic. It's running really well. It's scaling so well. We are now looking for Series A funding. But with what I'm doing, I think children are not an option. And when I hear things like that, I get one of two things. Either I get sad or I get mad. Because I'm thinking that women can have everything they want. They can have the career they want. They can have the children they want, the family, the partner, husband, whatever it is. But they need to believe in it first themselves, and then they go for it. But if you already believe that you can't have that, then it's not going to happen. That's how it is. So part of it is with the women, part of it is with social structures. For example, Switzerland, really not an ideal example for, and Justine can, my friend Justine, who is launching a business, she can talk about it, she's from Australia. Like, it's not the perfect circumstances for women to go to work. When you've got 3 young kids and you have got a husband who has got a great job, but you don't get, like, your children go to kindergarten from 8 to 12 and then have to go back at 1:30 till 4:30. What kind of support is that? Of course, there's only 40% of women working, and I feel really passionate about that. I'm German by background. I've lived in Australia for a long time. I think that Switzerland can look to its neighbors for some examples on how to do that better and empower women, really also give the frame structures for that. So you can see I get passionate about this.
As far as I know, you can soon become Swiss, then you can run for parliament.
Yes, it will take another 2 years, so give me some time.
Yeah, I like that. I would like to out myself. I'm, of course, also an employer. And as an employer, of course, I'm fond of women, and I like what you said. But after that, I would like to say, often I interview people, and they say, ladies often, they say, I would like to work 60% or 80%. And actually, in the jobs we offer, I want people to run 150%. So sometimes maybe it's also the mindset, and maybe it's my perception, and that's what I would like to discuss. If somebody says, I would like to work 60 to 80%, it means to me as an employer, this person is not giving me the full of the person, and that means I lose. Now, maybe I can ask Dalit, what do you think about that? Am I sexist or am I narrow-minded?
Not at all, and I have more than one company, and I'm struggling also with this question about having employee on 100% or less than 100%. And I absolutely agree with you. It's all about the structures that we have in Switzerland. And one of the things that would help a lot is a mindset transformation by having people who are coming to your home to help. I used to have for 13 years a granny nanny. She was coming early in the morning and staying with my kids the whole day. She was the person for my kids. When they were sick, they could stay at home. I didn't have to rush at 7 o'clock in the morning to bring them to the hort or whatever. When I came back home from work, the table was laid, everything was cooked. So the quality time that I had was when I came home. I wasn't in a hurry taking my kids from the hort, going to the Migros, doing some shopping, getting home and starting to cook and wash and all these things. And a lot of people looked at me and said, oh, how come you have a nanny? And then you have a cleaning woman. Are you too good to do it by yourself? Why do you have kids? And I think this is exactly the mindset transformation where we need. I probably had more quality time with my kids. I almost didn't miss any party at school, went with them to ice skating with the class, and I just took my free time to do so and invest in my kids. And when I was at home, they realized that I had an equilibre, balance. And this is all about, I think we have to bring the right system. It's not about pre-K. I mean, this is all things that are also important. But the problem is if you have to rush and get your kid at 6 o'clock and do your shoppings and all this kind of stuff, it doesn't matter if it's the father or the mother. And the whole thing, what starts to be, is that you have more and more people who, how do you say, sich scheiden lassen, who get divorce. And the whole ecosystem, the whole social system is at the end bleeding because the families are not the sustainable ecosystem itself anymore. And I think this is a mindset transformation where we see in Asia, I mean, or also in Israel. I'm half Israeli. I mean, when my mother came to Switzerland almost 50 years ago, I mean, she wasn't able to go to work because they told her, how come? You have to stay at home. And it was even worse. I mean, we went to school from 8 to 10, and my brother from 10 to 12, and then we've been for lunch for 2 hours, and so on. It was even bad.
I would like to second that. I out myself again. My mother is unfortunately dead, but she was a staunch Swiss Protestant. But when my wife started to work after the birth of, we have 2 sons, after 3 months or something, she said, "This is a raven, mother. I stayed at home with you until you were 5 years old." So we have this still, this feeling. Maybe to involve the audience, what is your view? How can we improve the system? I have somebody who would like to speak here. Do we have a microphone? Or can I hand it, perhaps? Yep. So I make myself useful. Please, if you could say who you are.
Hi, my name is Justine Violante, and Barbara mentioned me before. I'm a mother of 3 children, and I'm working part-time. I'm also looking to found my own business in the coming months. But my question is for Lauren, because you are connected to a governmentally funded organization. Do you get in contact with Parliament about the social structures for women, either being small business founders or as being employees? Because taxation is unfair, childcare is expensive. You know, it's not an ecosystem that is encouraging for women to get back in and to empower women to get back in and add value to the Swiss economy.
So I can't speak too specifically about the Swiss economy. I mean, we are a European body. We get our funding from the European Parliament, so from all the member states. So in that sense, we are in touch very regularly with the different governments and the European Parliament to defend the impact we're having with the investment we're making on behalf of the government. And it's a large amount of money. So we have to show impact and results. And of course, these issues are very real. I think they're dealt at the national level a lot. We do participate in many committees on women leadership, entrepreneurship, women challenges. So we try to show through our work that yes, this can be solved. Also, we have the chance of having thousands of partners in our communities around Europe, in the industry, in research, in academia, and they are being influenced by what we try to do to change the statu quo for the women across Europe. So again, I can't speak too specifically about Switzerland, but we have champions inside the European Parliament that are championing these issues and really trying to influence at the European level the legislation that then will trickle down to the member state. But also in, maybe reflecting a bit on one point before, I think yes, there are many good examples in Europe from other governments that maybe Switzerland is probably trying to learn from, but could learn even more from, the Nordic country, Germany, and so on, not so far away, where also the companies themselves are offering solutions to working women and try to bring them also, allow them to get to leadership position because they have solutions in place. So I think, there are solutions everywhere. You just have to try to find the best one and adapt them to your local situation and learn from the neighbors. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very good. Do we have another question? Yes, here. I come myself running to you, maybe. Please, if you could say who you are.
My name is Ronelle, and originally we wanted to create a co-working space for women. You were asking about solutions, and we just saw that the stacks are really high, that we hardly could create this co-working space because you have to have, I don't know how many bathrooms and the staff. So that would be really helpful if we could actually create co-working spaces for mothers so the kids would be nearby. They could have lunch together. And so we had to throw over our idea, and we're just trying to... Sorry?
I'm saying I think we need to go for coffee.
Okay. If that was the answer, then I think the problem is this would probably take... Can I take one question more? I know we are a little bit limited for time, but just one more. And then it's your cocktail which is waiting, but it's also your time to discuss.
Well, thank you for this energizing panel. My name's Caitlin Kraus, and I started my company Mindwise 2 years ago. So you've been talking a lot. I've heard the word mindset change the mindset, creativity. What traits would you look to really endorse and inspire in people that really have to do with leadership? So to be a good leader, to actually do this maybe around the system, around the rocks in place, for right now, what do you see as traits of a wise leader right now starting their business that you would want them to work on? This is for anyone on the panel.
Thank you.
But
very quick, maybe we start here, then through.
Yeah, I think one of the things is really to stand for what you want and do your career and get organized. And I just have one small anecdote. I used to have a conference call. I was in the IT world, normally the only woman. And I did it from home, and I was always on mute. And suddenly I just heard a child crying and a man's voice saying, "Oh, John, are you working from home today?" The other one said, "No, actually, it's not mine, so it needs to be someone else." And another guy said, "Oh, sorry, guys, it's my son." And then I realized that they just were joking about that, and it was like no problem at all. And I was always under stress that they won't hear my kids. So it is about standing up, telling them, listen, I am a working mother. I have my phone open. If my kids are calling, there is a reason. I'm going to always pick it up. But also telling them, listen, now I'm on work, also on the kids' side, and really try to divide that. It's quite hard, but it's on both sides.
Thank you. Laurent, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I think, a leader is the same. There's no difference, I think, in terms of gender. An inspiring leader is someone who can find the talent he or she needs to grow the business or change things. Maybe that question is also for politics. And they're leaders in all fields. So it's all about talent, I think. It's being able to surround yourself with the right talent you need to grow whatever your venture is, being a company, but also many other aspects.
Thank you. Subun, would you like to comment from your viewpoint?
Okay. So for me, I agree that actually sometimes you can run parallel. I think that's a good thing about women. They can do 10 things at one time. So, work-life balance, we are always balanced. Because, we kind of... So I think for women, at some time you can gear up, and other times you gear down. I think it's important. But I think it's more importantly that when you need help, you ask for help. So basically, I negotiated with my mother. So I was like, oh, I don't want to have kids, It's so troublesome. I want to build my career. And my mom wanted me to build my career. I said, oh, never mind. Just get pregnant for 9 months. The rest is easy. I'll take care of everything. I was like, are you sure? Yeah, sure, no problem. Okay, I get pregnant for 9 months, so that's the easy part. And then, and basically we hire a maid, and my mother supervised the maid. So actually my children, I have 2 kids, so they get to grow up with a grandmother and grandfather. And actually, like for myself and my husband, we are like married couple without kids, And then one day when my daughter is, my older one is a daughter, and when she was, 2 years old, and she said, Mom, where's my room? Actually, she stayed with my mother. So I said, your room? Oh, I got a guest room at home. So I said, okay, now we change the system. So we basically take her back after dinner. So we have dinner at my mom's place. And then my daughter will sleep at our place. And then in the morning, we'll send her back to my mom's place together with our laundry. So, don't do all this lousy job, right? Our time is so valuable. So what I do is, my mother is very supportive. She said, in my time, I want to work. And now, your job, when we were growing up, your job is really to study. That's our job. And I want you to be excellent. So she's a tiger mother. So, we grew up in a tiger mother. And she's helping us, to be successful, right? So she said, all the mundane thing, get the kids, the milk and all that. She said, don't worry. So we basically spend time reading to our kids when they're very young. Bedtime story, we read it. So when we went to the US, my daughter, when she's 4.5 years old, she could read. And the American mother told the teacher, the kindergarten teacher, and said, this is not fair. You're spending time with this Chinese girl, and she can read, and my kids cannot read. And I was like, okay, we have been reading for her since she's a baby, right? So we actually spend quality time on reading. So I think you can do it.
Thank you.
So it's up to you to subcontract.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Barbara, for a closing word.
You were... Yeah, just briefly, Caitlin, you were asking about the traits of a leader, right? Oh, the skills, yeah. Okay, so just very quickly, I think clarity of vision is the #1 for me, because when you are clear on what you want to achieve and you've got the capability to motivate your team behind, it's all smooth sailing. So that's, and of course that would be a lengthy red wine discussion otherwise.
Thank you very much. Now we move on, and the quality of a leader who should moderate is to introduce the next speaker and keep time. So I thank the panel very much, and please thank with me. Thank you very much. And we come to our last guest star tonight, which is Lina B. And Lina B is here. Welcome very much. You speak to us about the showcase of female founders. And I may also use your attention for the last moment. You are co-founder of the Female Founders Summit as well. You're responsible for strategic partnerships at Allianz Suisse. So you're also for the collaboration. You have experience in social entrepreneurship and impact investing, and you understand a lot about disruptive and innovative digital processes. Welcome. Thank you.
Is this working? Yeah.
Yes.
So unfortunately, we're coming to an end of the Female Founders Summit 2017, and I really hope you've enjoyed the program so far. 2 years ago, Carol Hoffmann and I founded the Female Founders Summit because we wanted to give female entrepreneurs a stage to present their innovations and which is very important, to establish connections and networks with other founders and investors so that they can scale up their business when they're ready to do so. So every year in the afternoon we have 10 pitching slots where women with innovative and scalable startups can present their business idea in front of an audience of venture capitalists, business angels, and representatives from corporates or venture capitalists. So if you couldn't make it to the pitching session this afternoon, we have now 3 showcases to give you some idea what those cases look like who apply to the Female Founders Summit. Like this year, for the 10 pitching slots, we had approximately 100 applications from all kinds of industries, like medtech, life science, fintech, consumer goods, and so forth. And compared to last year, we actually saw a lot of tech-related ventures, a lot more than we saw last year. So opposed to common belief that there are only very few women in tech, I can assure you that numbers are rising, and that's a really great indication, and we're happy that we saw this year. So the 3 showcases we have tonight are 3 women who applied for the pitching sessions this year, and they are from very different areas, but they all have something in common. They put all their energy and passion into growing their ventures, and they came up with something innovative and scalable, and I'm really honored to present to you tonight our first showcase, Katrin from Trackle.
Hi, hello, good evening. Thanks for staying, even if someone already announced the cocktails. So my name is Katrin. I'm the CEO of Trackle. And just as a short introduction, Trackle is a wearable that helps women to identify their individual fertility window by tracking body core temperature. Some of you might know that already. It's a good situation to pitch in front of women, by the way. I might only have to explain half of the technology behind it. Yeah, so it's based on tracking body core temperature and understanding when exactly ovulation happens, because ovulation as a biological process is directly connected to a rise of body core temperature. And when you can detect that rise, you can very exactly tell when ovulation happens, so when you can get pregnant, or in case you don't want to get pregnant, when you have to use contraception. So why do we do that? I guess you all know that fertility management is something that is important for all women and all couples of a very long phase in life, but especially two groups of women are very interested in our device. It's those that want to get pregnant and where it doesn't work, and those women who want to not get pregnant but do not want to use hormone contraception. So they all rely on knowing exactly when their individual fertility window is. So the original method of tracking body core temperature, doing naturally family planning, is very traditional and very, very uncomfortable. And that's also where this idea comes from. I myself have 2 kids, 2 sons, and when we wanted to have the first one, I started with tracking my temperature, and then after the first one, I didn't want to get pregnant directly after, and then after the second, I thought, okay, that's it, thanks. But I tried this method of tracking my temperature, and it was a mess, because you might know it's very strict rules you have to follow. It's an approximate value that you measure every morning in on a manual way, and then you transfer this data that you've manually taken onto a piece of paper or in an app or whatever, and it's not very reliable, and it's really uncomfortable. And I was sitting there every morning with a digital thermometer in my one hand and my mobile phone in the other hand, and thought, why don't you speak? Why don't you make my life easier by directly contact? And why do I have to manually transfer the data, make it more unsecure? So what we need is an automated way to get this temperature and transfer it. And that's what we do. It's a temperature sensor that's worn within the vagina overnight. It has to be worn there because we need body core temperature, and it's a very comfortable place to get it there. And then it transfers its data in the morning to our cloud service. The learning algorithms in the backend do predictions and process your cycle data. And then you can see on your app every day what is the exact cycle situation. Can I get fertile today? Can I get pregnant or can't I? So the team behind me is my husband and a friend of ours and an app company. We founded this company together, and we are at the moment preparing for our market entry. So development is done, prototyping is done, financial rounds are through, and yeah, we are entering the market at very beginning next year. And when I was asked to present here, I was also asked what the idea behind that is and why it could be an inspiring presentation for all of you. And I think when I thought about the bigger picture behind that project, I think getting pregnant or not getting pregnant is a very, very important question, not only for women, but also for couples, for families, for society even. So this sort of decision shouldn't be just based on feelings or assumptions or pressure even. I think that sort of decision should be based on data. And the data is there. So the exact data when the fertility window opens is there and available. We just have to lay it open and make it visible. And we now have the option to do so. The technical possibilities are now there. The sensors are small, the algorithms are working, the cloud is available. So this is the bigger picture behind this product. And yeah, hope to have it explained well. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to contact me afterwards.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me tonight. I would like to talk today about why it's good to start your business in an industry you have no clue about. My name is Anna, and I'm the founder of 5 Skincare. When I started my career in the cosmetic industry, I was a graphic designer before, and I could hardly distinguish toothpaste from skin cream. But I faced a problem. I didn't find any natural cosmetic that were transparent and understandable enough for me that I wanted to use them every day on my face. So every time when I turned around a product, I saw this crazy list. Like, we should see it now, but it doesn't work. Maybe it's the wrong side, sorry. So, here is the fancy list. That's a normal ingredient list of a normal face cream, and it was really a mystery to me. I was asking myself, how am I supposed to find out what my skin really likes and what my sensitive skin needs? And why does a face cream need about 30 ingredients? So we know that it is a fact that more and more consumers are demanding transparent products. But how could you explain a product consists of 30 ingredients? So I guess it's really not possible. And for me, the idea came up to reduce the amount of ingredients to a minimum, because transparency comes with simplicity. And that's exactly what we're doing with 5 Skincare. We bring transparency to the beauty market by producing natural and vegan skincare products with a maximum of 5 ingredients. And we feature every ingredient big on the packaging. In this way, we give our customers the opportunity to understand what comes under their skin. Of course, the beginning of 5 Skincare was not that easy as you might think. When I presented my idea to experts from the industry, I heard a lot of, that's not practicable, that's even not possible, because if you want to create a cream, you have to combine a lot of stuff. You have to combine fat with water. Therefore, you need emulsifiers. Then you have to preserve the water in the cream, so you need a lot of preservatives. So you can easily have 10 or more ingredients in a cream, and the cream still has any use for your skin. So it's not really surprising that the cosmetic industry still works with winning promises instead of actions. And for me, it was clear that it couldn't be the way forward. So I really believed that I had an assumption, and I really believed that there are a lot of consumers out there just literally waiting for someone to bring transparent products to market. And I thought that that would be my advantage to know really the customer point of view. So, of course, I had to test my assumption, and I had to figure out totally new products in the skincare area. So I sold my first products on a pop-up market here in Zurich, even before the company was founded. And I would like to try if my ideas really suits only me or if somebody is interested. And the feedback was overwhelming. So we finally launched 5 Skincare in Germany and in Austria. And this summer, after 1 year test market in Switzerland, we sell exclusively online, and we made a revenue of more than 55,000 francs in the first few weeks. And what I learned from that, sometimes it's good to address a problem from another perspective. And it's your advantage if you're not in the comfort zone of your industry or of another industry. So this also could be your chance. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So our third and last showcase for tonight is Mariam. She creates huge impact in the world because thanks to her business, less people will die from liver disease in the future. Please welcome Mariam.
Thank you, Lina, and thank you everyone for staying so late. My name is Myriam Kabaj. I'm a co-founder of Versantis. Versantis is a pharmaceutical company focused on the development of products in the liver disease area. Liver disease is a low-profile area, and yet it's the 5th big killer in Europe because current treatments are ineffective and unsafe. So why is that? Over the past years, the pharma industry had literally neglected this area due to the strong social stigma associated to drug and alcohol abuse. Now, fortunately, this is slowly changing, and other causes such as hepatitis, diabetes, or drug intoxications are revealing a new commercial interest. There are 2 million patients affected with liver cirrhosis, and they truly live with the death sentence because anytime they are at risk of developing acute complications such as brain failure, called as well hepatic encephalopathy, or renal failure. And when these complications arise, the mortality rate of these patients is as high as 80%. Now, believe it or not, as of today, these patients can only rely on preventive care. There are no drugs for them, and the only cure is a liver transplant. But 50% of the patients actually die while they're still waiting for a new liver. So as you can see, there is a huge medical gap where Versantis would like to position its first product, VS01. I would like to give you just a better grasp of the medical need in this area, and I have a short trailer that explains what hepatic encephalopathy, or HE, is. Hope it works.
I don't understand what's going on, but I know there's something wrong with me.
You start losing contact with your brain.
All that ammonia and toxicity in my brain felt like almost like it was on fire.
I'm blank. I go blank.
It's like that, like a sphere sometimes in my brain. I feel like the sphere, you know, touch it, you go, whoa, whoa. And that's how my thinking is. It's like, I know there's pressure here.
Living on high alert is, it's become a way of life.
How long do we have to see you deteriorate with HE before something else is done for you?
It's definitely alarming, but at Versantis, we developed the new product that could be a new hope for these patients. VS01 is a suspension that is administered in the abdominal cavity and that acts like a vacuum cleaner that will capture all the toxins that are known to accumulate in these patients. Our product can support the liver, but as well the brain and the renal functions. Without going into much details, this is very suitable to acute liver indications, which are actually multi-organ diseases. So why Versantis tackles acute indications? Because this is where the medical need is the highest. In our pipeline, we're developing a second product that is for the prevention, and we're also trying to develop a diagnostic test to better monitor the care of these patients. And this way, we can assure continuity of care of liver disease patients. So this sets the stage of the 3 business units we really envision at Versantis. Last March, we closed our first financial round of $4.5 million. This will bring us to the first clinical test in humans in next year. This data in hand will offer us our first exit opportunity, but alternatively, we can decide to raise a Series B and C and push the development forward up to marketing approval. In any case, throughout our development, we think we have a strong pipeline, and we will offer exit packages that we think will be attractive for large pharma companies. We have ambitious goals and a committed team of dedicated people with complementary skills. Vincent Forster is the CEO of Versantis. He has the technical know-how. Myself, I come with a clinical background. Jean-Christophe Leroux is professor at ETH and renowned in the field of pharmaceutical sciences. On the business side, we're backed up by Peter Nicklin, who's the former vice president of Baxter, a large pharma company. And we collaborate very closely with the EF Cliff Consortium, which regroups more than 80 hepatologists across Europe for the clinical aspect of the development. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention and leave you maybe to the apéro and take care of your liver. Be careful not to drink too much.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much all for coming and to attend the Female Founder Summit 2017. Please use the time, the apéro, to connect with each other, to network. If you found those cases as inspiring as I did, please also join the pitching session next year. We had 10 more this year, this afternoon, so please also join those sessions the next years. And Female Founders Summit Association is still a very young organization too, so if you find a few minutes this week to think about the event again and hit us some feedback, we would very much appreciate that. Please have a lovely evening, connect with each other. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for staying so long and make the female cause great again. Have a nice evening and come again next year.